Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dedicated Show. Really excited to have you join us here today. We're going to talk about market intelligence and going beyond Google. Our guest today is the CEO and founder of Diffbot. And not only are we going to talk about market intelligence, he's actually willing to provide some advice on how to get into machine learning or how to get a job at a Silicon Valley startup. So we're going to go through all of that. We're definitely taking questions from the audience. So as you're joining, let us know if you have any specific questions on market intelligence or Diffbot or getting into machine learning or joining a startup. We're here to go ahead and answer as many questions as we can and also drop some knowledge bombs here. So as you're joining, one question I have for you is let us know what you do. Are you a data analyst? Are you a data scientist? Are you a student? Are you looking to join the data space? Whatever it is that you do, just let us know in the comments. It's going to help us structure the rest of the talk. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Mike up on our virtual stage here. Hello, Mike. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And where are you tuning in from?
I'm tuning in from the Dipbot office. So we are located in sunny California in what's called SRI, the Stanford Research Institute, which is about 2 blocks from the Stanford campus.
Wow, that's very cool. So you probably have all that talent walking around all the time. Well, or used to pre-COVID, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
before COVID, they're probably walking around. Now they're walking around virtually at home.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully soon things will turn around. So, welcome to the show again. And as you know, people are joining. Let everybody know a little bit about yourself. Who are you, and what is Diffbot?
Sure. So my name is Mike Tung. I'm the, like Kate said, the CEO and founder of Diffbot. What is Diffbot? So Diffbot is basically a collective of about 40 or so machine learning researchers and knowledge graph enthusiasts. The mission at Diffbot is to build the first complete map of human knowledge. And the way that we do that is to use artificial intelligence. So we're one of the few companies that crawls the whole web, much like Google and Bing do in the US. We have a web crawler, and we have basically artificial intelligence algorithms that can read and understand the pages on the web. And we convert that into a knowledge graph, which I'm happy to talk more about later. But we essentially want to bring structure to the web and build like a factual kind of search engine of facts rather than, this ad-supported kind of thing that we're dealing with right now.
No sponsored content.
No, yeah. There's kind of a conflict of interest, we believe, between advertising and getting you the information that you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned first complete map of human intelligence. Mm-hmm. Okay. What does that even look like? Is it all of human intelligence? Is it global? Tell us more.
So. Think about like the Library of Alexandria, right? And think about, in previous eras, it could comprehend what it meant, right? For like to understand all of human knowledge. And like back in the Renaissance, you had these folks that really dabbled in all sorts of different fields, right? But as we know, with the internet and everything, there's been just like an explosion of knowledge, explosion of all these fields. People have become hyper specialized, right? And it's no longer possible, right, to build like the modern day Library of Alexandria to organize all of the knowledge and actually make it useful. Mm-hmm. So I started thinking about this I guess a long time ago, since I was very young. When I was a kid, I read all of the books in the library, and then I thought, okay, it's no longer possible for a person to like absorb all the knowledge. We need to have actually an AI system that can understand and curate all of the knowledge and keep it all up to date, because it's basically going stale all the time, and knowledge is always changing. And so to build like this system that you could actually query and ask questions to, and that actually knew all of the public information, the only way to do that was really to build like an artificially intelligent system.
Very interesting. So you read all the books in the library. Now I'm already thinking of Matilda.
This is a very small library in like rural Massachusetts, it's like a kid section of a library.
So that was the inspiration. And I noticed in your profile, you've spent some time at Yahoo. So I wanted to ask, how did your time at Yahoo kind of inspire your professional journey?
Sure. Yahoo's in the news today. I think they just got sold to a PE firm for $5 billion. So I don't know if your audience remembers a time where there was alternative search engines to Google, and there was this thing called Yahoo, and there was this thing called AltaVista and Lycos and Excite.com and Dogpile. But it was basically like the mid 2000s. There were multiple search engines, and I was working at this one called Yahoo. I had a friend of mine referred me there, so I was working as a contracting job. And so my goal at Yahoo, basically back in the Stone Ages, mid 2000s, was to analyze the search logs of Yahoo, do data science on it, right? Before really that was a word, and we were just basically trying to optimize the ranking function of Yahoo and optimize how the ads displayed and optimized placement of the ads, like how many pixels and how large each one should be. And so we had these internal systems. One of them was called Mino, where you could mine through the logs and basically run these batch jobs, like these SQL queries, and try to test different hypotheses about users. And I think, and in terms of how it got me into this field, it was sort of my introduction into search. And I was fascinated by search engines and how they could tap into all of the knowledge in the world, but it's still very rudimentary. It's just like ranking pages. And then I guess it inspired me to later on found like a search engine company that we sold to Facebook and build like a video search engine. Those are some early startups that I participated in, and ultimately led me to start my own company, Diffbot.
Very interesting that you spent some time working on the best ad placements and size and pixels, and then went off to sponsored content. Yeah. Who needs that?
Yeah, I was on the dark side for a while.
Well, I guess, then you go to the good side. So that's awesome. So the topic of the day here is market intelligence. So I think it would make sense for us to define kind of what does this really entail? What's market intelligence?
Yeah, so market intelligence, it's not a new thing. So since I guess the dawn of time, there have been markets, and then there have been, you want to gain insight about the market, right? You want to know about the vendors, the suppliers, your customers, your partners. And especially with the internet and everything now connected online, we basically have a global marketplace, right? Instead of just like a local marketplace. And the way to view the internet is basically it's like the world's largest sensor, right? Like even though your business might not be connected to the internet, it has some kind of digital presence. So you can know about, okay, where is this company? Has it been merged with another company or spun out like Yahoo was today?
Yeah.
What's the market cap? What is the industry it's in? How are they hiring? So there's all these market signals basically. Yeah. And intelligence is the function, it usually sits within the marketing organization. If it's like in, like an investment firm, it might be like the analyst doing market research. And they just want to basically have intelligence about the companies in a certain sector or space, right? To help inform decisions, whether it's product development, whether it's just understanding their customer better so they can improve that product, whether it's making investments, so deciding how to allocate capital, having the right intelligence and timely intelligence that's up to date. It basically determines how well you can do any of those activities. Right.
And so on the topic of market intelligence, you said it's not a new concept, right? People have been trying to get as much market intelligence as they can since forever. Yeah. But how has the market kind of changed from a business perspective? Like, should I use Google to get market intelligence, or do I use something new called Dipbot that people might not be as familiar with as Google? And what would be some of those differences in that experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of the gap is sort of the reason we created Diffbot, but it depends on your industry, right? So if you are working on Wall Street and you're a trader, you might use something like a Bloomberg terminal to get market intelligence, and you might get the ticker data, right? But the ticker data, it's only just like a single number about a company, which is like its share price, right? There's so many other signals and alternative data out there about a company that might give you an edge over the ticker data, which everyone has access to, right? Like you might want to know what is the hiring trend of this company? Did they recently raise funding? Did they recently put out a job post looking for a certain kind of skill set in their company? Yeah. Have they been in the news, right? Is there a big scandal about the company? Risk signals, for example, right? So all of these things, are sort of market intelligence. And where traditionally you might, let's say in the pre-internet age, subscribe to these curated feeds, right? Like Bloomberg or Dun & Bradstreet or something like LexisNexis to like get these sources of information. We think that's sort of inadequate in the internet age, where things are changing basically every minute, and there's tremendous volumes of these signals and market intelligence. And on the other side, how do you take advantage of that as a business? So everyone is familiar with like Google search, of course, and Google search is primarily designed for consumers, and of course we mentioned they show advertising. But is that really something that is a professional tool, right? Like none of your other professional tools are ad-supported software that have like a banner ad on them. How do you get data in a structured format so you can actually do analyses on it, right? So Google doesn't have a way that you can actually query it in a structured way and then get back structured data that you might, let's say, run some automation on, or that you might build like a quantitative trading model on, right? And you can't easily access that with Google, just giving you basically a list of pages to read.
Right, absolutely. And we actually have a question that's really relevant. That's a good follow-up here. So how can one best acquire reliable data for this really 360 view of customers, suppliers, vendors, and competitors?
Well, use Dipbot is all I really have to say about that. It's, think about how one does that today, right? So you might, you might have a new partner or a new supplier or one of your customers. You might search for them on Google, right? And why do we go to Google? It's because Google, it indexes all these different sites, right? But you still have to do a lot of work to actually make that into actionable information, right? You still have to read all of those sites. So Google doesn't read those pages for you. It just sort of sorts them for your attention with a ranking algorithm. But then you have to read them, and then you have to discover, okay, which is correct? Is this like a stale article that was from a year ago that might not be the current state of the company anymore? And so you have to, in your head, kind of do this process we call research, like comparing these different things. And that's sort of what we're trying to automate with AI, this aspect of the fact checking and the comparison. And it's a research problem that we call knowledge fusion that we study at Dipbot.
Yeah, you mentioned fact checking, which immediately in my mind relates to fake news. And how do you kind of avoid pulling the data or the inaccurate, unreliable data? And I don't know, there's some AI behind that can
It's misinformation is a huge problem in our society today, right now. And it's a problem that, forget about AI, that it's difficult for people to judge, right? When looking at content, how to believe it or how much to trust it, right? So we have like a couple actually startups and groups that actually are explicitly, one of them is called Factomata in the UK. That's fighting fake news, and they use Dipbot data to power those algorithms, right? So we can tell that, okay, should be a trustworthy source. This blog post that was just formed last week that's based out of the Ukraine might not be the most trustworthy source. Like Wikipedia.
Hey. My husband's Ukrainian, man. What are you trying to say here?
Yeah. Well, I just meant like, if it was just formed last week, there might not have any, it might not have established a reputation for producing good facts yet, right? Like think about how we, as humans, intrinsically judge, like the trustworthiness of sources. We have to basically develop machine learning algorithms that can do this as well, and then give you accurate probabilities as to whether they're the true fact or not, right? And then we return those probabilities actually in our knowledge search engine when we're querying the knowledge graph. Yeah,
and George also says that it's hard to know what you don't know, and I understand. It is a human issue, it is an AI issue, and it's something I'm hoping that gets fixed over the next couple of years, or at least positive progress. We had a question here from Ravit, and I know you already mentioned kind of what was your inspiration for Diffbot, but maybe we kind of go back a little bit and talk about the evolution and history of the different phases that Diffbot has gone through and where you are now.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by AI and artificial intelligence since I was very young. As a child, I got into programming pretty early on, and then I think like back in middle school or so, developed like this trading algorithm to buy and sell stocks, like using a neural network. So I was just very fascinated by this idea of automating reasoning and intelligence. And Diffbot was basically a spin out from my work as a grad student at Stanford, where I was in the PhD program. And I studied basically, specialized in ML AI. So I took like Andrew Ng's like a original course, like in person,
Oh, wow.
back when he offered it, like the first, version of it. And I was playing around with like analyzing protein sequences and bioinformatics. And so I got really into AI and ML. And then this combined with my passion to like trying to understand the web and information and structure it, those two ideas sort of came together. And at first I wasn't trying to really do a company. I was like hustling and doing these side gigs, like working at Yahoo, and like I joined like one of my professor's startups that he was an advisor at, as one of the founding engineers. But then after all these experiences, I got, I guess, some confidence that maybe I should start my own thing. And then that's when I started Diffbot.
And how long ago did you start Dipbot again? I'm not sure to mention this.
So I had these ideas, and I was kind of thinking of these ideas way back in grad school, but we didn't formally like incorporate and kind of launch until about 2012. Mm-hmm. And we basically, the way we launched it was we put up a post on Hacker News. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, I know.
But we basically launched like a machine learning version of article extraction, which is something that Readability does. And it was trending basically as the #1 story in Hacker News for a long time. And then I noticed we started getting like these customers that are just Silicon Valley engineers working at like AOL, StumbleUpon and stuff, signing up for the service. And it was a paid service out of the gate because we had no funding. So, it had to be paid basically so we could afford the server bill. And I noticed like these tech companies and Silicon Valley engineers started signing up for the service. And then we sort of convinced their bosses to get larger and larger plans. And then we got actually from AOL, like probably our first big contract, like $250,000. And then we felt like, hey, we should start hiring people and then start like building a business out of it. And that's when I started, and I would say one thing I'm proud of is we're one of like the few organizations in Silicon Valley that does original AI research that is a profitable organization and like sort of self-sustaining from our revenues, of the product we offer.
That's definitely something to be proud of. So that's awesome. We had a question here. It says from LinkedIn user, sometimes privacy settings are on, so we don't know who's asking, but the question is, if you're indexing the facts of the internet, how do you synthesize what is true or untrue? I know we touched on this a bit, but does Diffbot prescribe what is a fact, or is that still up to the user to kind of make that call?
So this is called an area that we call knowledge fusion. I'll describe it generally. So there's basically facts. We're crawling the web and analyzing and understanding all of the pages on the web. But what happens when you have different pages that say different things, basically? You have to kind of resolve those conflicts, right? And you have to know, okay, maybe this page is stale information, right? Maybe a fact was true at a certain point in time, but is no longer true. So we need to be able to know what's called data provenance. We need to record when it was retrieved and the timestamp of that. And then this is an active research area, but there's all sorts of techniques to try to calculate a probability that it's a true fact or not a true fact. One is the trustworthiness of the origin, right? Like Wikipedia.com or Wikipedia.org rather. We trust a lot more because it has a history of generating other facts that agree with the consensus, right? And the citations and things like that. So the algorithm assigns it a much higher trust score than like a brand new domain, right? That isn't interlinked with the rest. There's also this aspect of what's called ontological reasoning. So if there was a fact on a website that said like Mike Tung lives on the planet Venus, right? It would assign a very low weight to that fact because the knowledge graph knows Mike Tung works at Diffbot. Diffbot is based in Menlo Park in California, part of the US on planet Earth. Earth is millions of miles away from Venus. So it's unlikely he commutes millions of miles from home planet of Venus to work. And so statistically, it would just be a very low weight to that event. And so you can make reasons like that using AI. And
wouldn't it be easier to just simply say nobody lives on Venus and then,
Well, it would never be zero because I'm sure people will live on Mars, at some point in the future, or who knows, maybe people do live on Venus.
I hope to see.
What is
I hope to
truth?
see this one day. Yes. Tom's here saying it's really great. He hopes that this goes big. Yeah, I hope so too. This sounds like you can fix
Thanks, Tom.
all the search issues. There was a question here from Ravid. So he says, "Love your journey. How often do you map this information? Right? Is this real-time mapping of all this data, and do you have to deal with data privacy as well?"
Yeah. Data privacy is something we're very passionate about, and we actually power a lot of privacy-oriented applications. Like DuckDuckGo search engine is actually powered by Diffbot. So one thing is the Diffbot knowledge graph, which is crawling the public web. It's crawling the public web, so there's nothing private about what's on the public web, right? So there isn't a priori any information that's private or it's like authenticated or behind a login inside the Diffbot knowledge graph. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That said, another property of the Dipbot knowledge graph is it has data provenance. So for every fact that's returned by the knowledge graph, it tells you the primary source of that information.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like one of these, sketchy data vendor companies where you don't really know where the data comes from, right? There's kind of this dark pool of data. It's actually pointing you to the primary public source on the web. And in many cases, each fact has multiple sources and multiple citations of where it got that from. And so where it is from the web, and you can verify that as a human being, and it has full transparency for that information. So you can actually use it to find privacy violations, right? If there was some leak out there, and Dipbot would point you to where that is to help you better lock down your privacy, actually. And of course, we believe any entity in the Dipbot knowledge graph, if you are like the person that has a fact about, you have the right and you own your ability to control that information. So we are fully compliant with things like GDPR and CCPA in California, and are big fans of like those kinds of things.
Is it sort of like the Google Knowledge Panel? I know about this because I recently got approved to be like my own entity, and it took like a year for Google to approve me for people to know that I am me, right?
Yeah.
So, but now if I wanted to make updates, I actually do have a place where I send an email and say, hey, use this different photo or title for my company.
Yeah.
Do you guys do something similar with people have actual updates? Absolutely.
Yeah. If you are the entity, you can actually go and you can correct and update your information in the knowledge graph. You can contribute to it basically as a contributor. I'd say we go even a much further step beyond Google, and that Google Knowledge Panel doesn't always tell you like where the information is sourced from. It doesn't have like a comprehensive list of citations around it. And so that's actually a lot of people don't realize that there's actually a lot of human curation involved behind the scenes in those Google Knowledge Panels.
I assume that's why it took so long.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't AI, it wouldn't have taken a year.
Yeah, I know. For somebody to look at a driver's license and say, yep, that looks like you, Okay, cool. So when I was on the site, I read a quote that definitely made me very curious. So I'll read out the quote and then maybe you can tell us a little bit more. So the quote was, unlike traditional web scraping tools, Diffbot doesn't require any rules to read the content on a page. So tell us more about this process. How are you going around the web scraping rules?
Yeah, so for those of you that are like data scientists, it's a very popular topic in data science is web scraping and getting data. So traditional web scraping tools are basically things like Beautiful Soup, for example, are basically tools where you have to build these rules in order to get information from a page, right? You have to create what are called like regular expressions or CSS patterns. And the problem with that, and that's fine if you're just trying to do that on a single page, is you have to maintain these rules, and you can't really scale it to tens of hundreds or the whole internet. You definitely cannot, right? So so especially if, like, let's say the website changes their layout or template, then all of the rules break, right? So on average, we've talked to companies that have moved from that sort of rule-based traditional web scraping to Diffbot. On average, 15% of your rules will break in any given week. And then you'll just lose your data. You won't be able to have any data from that source anymore. That's not so great for market intelligence, right?
No.
If your data is like just going away, you have to have like an enormously large team just like patching the rules all the time, right? There are visual web scraping tools where you're just pointing and clicking, but behind the scenes, that pointing and clicking is just creating, again, brittle rules visually. How Diffbot is different is you don't have to do any of that. You just point it at a URL. Diffbot classifies what kind of page is this? Is it an article page? Is it a product page? Is it an organization page? Is it an image page? And then it automatically converts that into structured data. So if it's a product, here's the price, the SKU, the brand, the color, the fabric, the patch. That's returned as what's called a JSON object to the developer. And it doesn't break if the site just totally redesigns or they hire like a new web designer and all the fonts are different the next day. It just continues running. And it's also great if you are doing anything at scale, right? So if you're Walmart, Macy's, you're a large consumer of product information, you're building product catalogs, you want to monitor all of your competitors, you can't really build these rule-based things for every site on the web. There could be millions of different sites.
Well, speaking of millions of different sites, is there a limit as to how many pages you can scrape, or I guess entities that you can query?
Well, I mean, there's your pricing plan that you're on. That's like there's that limit, but there isn't really a limit to the Diffbot knowledge graph itself, right? So we have the Diffbot knowledge graph, which is our search engine of the web. That's basically it's structuring the entire web proactively and then allowing you to query it. And then customers can also create what's called crawl-by crawls of individual sites, right? So if you want to monitor all of the products across, let's say, a dozen or so e-commerce sites, you can create a crawl-by crawl to do that, right? So we have brands like Nike and Adidas that they want to find all the people that are selling fake Nikes on the web, or understand when they launch a new running shoe, like what do people like about it? Is it the fabric? Is it the styling? Is it the durability? It's the comfort. They can keep track of all that with market monitoring in the knowledge graph. Yeah,
it's interesting. You mentioned that as an example, like the running shoes, because I know eBay would probably sell some of those. Someone here saying that eBay is making it really difficult to scrape now because they keep changing their page structure. So I'm assuming this wouldn't be an issue for Diffbot, right?
Yeah, you should try Diffbot. So this is exactly the pain point that why developers love our product, because they don't have to deal with these breaking rules all the time.
There's a follow-up question on web scraping. Does this violate any data privacy rules in any countries?
Well, I think no. I'm not an expert in every single country's like standards and everything like that. My general stance is you should be able to read public domain information that's on the web, right? It doesn't. You should be able to. We don't crawl the web any differently than the Google search engine crawls it, right?
Okay.
Whereas Google actually saves a copy of the page it crawls, Diffbot actually doesn't return back any that page itself. So there's no like cached link kind of thing in Diffbot at all. So the way that we crawl the public web is really no different than Google. Obviously, we respect all of like the well-known privacy standards like GDPR and CCPA, so the right to be forgotten, to be if you want to suppress your entity, you can. So we're fully in compliance with all of the major privacy policies, but obviously, if you use it, you should definitely, I don't know if there's some weird countries policies out there.
Like Ukraine, right? Like Ukraine, is that what you're talking about? Ukraine? I'm kidding. So we've got a question here from Gilbert. Said it's great listening to your story. What has been your biggest challenge as an entrepreneur after you launched Diffbot?
I think it's a great question. So I think it's the biggest challenge as an entrepreneur of a startup like Diffbot is basically growing yourself as a CEO and founder in order to run the company. So if you think about my background, I was basically like this PhD student. I still am today, like a programmer, a coder, a hacker, very technical person basically. And then now Dipbot is a company of about 40 people. So all of these skills I've had to learn over time, like raising money from VCs, right? Like we've raised close to $13 million, like selling into enterprise, like large companies, hiring a world-class, caliber people, talent from all around the world. These are skills I didn't have like as a PhD student. So it's been a journey for me, like trying to just learn these things over time and also hire people that can complement myself, where I'm weak.
Yeah, that makes sense. And before, I know we were going to do a quick demo, so people stay tuned. We're going to have a demo soon. There's a comment here, a question from Russell. Should the prevailing privacy regulations for web scraping be those of location of owner, location of scraper, or location of data storage location?
So I'm not I don't think I'm an expert in this area to like give you like advise you on this thing, because you know, I don't know if you have a particular situation that you're dealing with, you know, that you that you want advice on. I would say all three of those things are relevant, you know, and comply with whatever laws you operate in.
Please contact a privacy lawyer. That's what I'm going to add. Okay, and can Dipbot scrape PDFs?
If they're publicly on the web, then yes, we can basically analyze and structure PDF content.
Awesome. I think this is a good time for us to jump over to the demo so people can actually see what some of this looks like. So I've gone ahead and shared your screen.
Okay. So I wanted to start with a demo of what Kate shared on LinkedIn. What was it, like a week or so ago, to show you how we use AI to actually structure information. So, as I explained earlier, we basically, you know, we analyze web pages. We're trying to analyzing the type of the page, but we're also trying to analyze what the page says, right, and convert it into structure. So here's an example of some text that we're feeding into our natural language capability. So this is just, you know, a bio pulled from, you know, like a corporate website, for example. And here's an example of the knowledge graph that we can build from reading and understanding this text. So you can see here, the main parts of a knowledge graph are the entities. So these are the circles or nodes, and then the relationships, which are the edges. And what Dipbot does is it reads and understands this text, and it could be really in any language. So I can show you also examples in other languages, and it identifies the entities mentioned in the text. So you see here, myself, you know, I'm a person. Yahoo is an organization. Stanford is an organization, and you can see sort of like the confidence levels of each of these things. And the relationships you can see here, for example, position held, and you can see as I'm hovering over these facts, it's highlighting like the evidence for that fact inside the text. And we're also, you can see here, for example, you know, we're inferring the temporality of the facts too, because obviously it's very important whether it's currently true or not. So you can see here, Mike Tung, employee member of Yahoo, is not current, meaning that's a past job I have, right? So that's very important as well. I could show you other examples. So let's say if you were to pull up a Chinese article, for example, it can do that same analysis, and you'll notice the knowledge graph isn't in that language. It's actually in it's actually in a knowledge, it's sort of a language-free representation of things, and each of these things is you know, an entity. We've done larger scale demos of this as well. So here's one where we did of the entire Old Testament. Let's see if I can show you.
This is extremely cool, by the way. Like, I've seen this before, and I'm still like, wow, this is so cool. I wasn't aware that you could do this in Chinese. Is this every language, or? Yeah,
it's every well, the internet is in every language, right? So
one of the
things that's different between Dipbot and Google is there's not a different search engine for every language. It's a singular knowledge graph of all the world's knowledge. So if you use Google search, for example, you're searching a different index if you search in Chinese versus if you search in French, for example. You're searching just the French web. This is just a larger scale demo of what happens if you pass in the entire Old Testament from the entire family tree of, here we go, Adam and Eve here.
Oh my God.
All the characters. So it was able to build this, right, in just like less than 10 seconds. We did a similar thing with Game of Thrones, where we built the world's largest Game of Thrones family tree, larger than the fans were able to build on Wikia. So each of these entities is essentially a node. So I can, let's say, drill down into one of these, like Yahoo. So each entity has its identifier. And so, you might want to know about Yahoo, that, it's a subsidiary of a certain company, who the key people are, who are like the subsidiaries or companies they've acquired, recent news and articles about Yahoo. So I can click on that to read recent news across the web. You can also sort of, it's the Diffbot example. You can also sort of navigate and browse across entities in the knowledge graph. So let's see if I can show you that. So, let's say Diffbot is a SaaS company. So I can query the knowledge graph for all SaaS companies. So let me show a tabular view of that. So you can do a lot of things you can't do in Google because it's structured like a database. So you see Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, and you can kind of browse the local neighborhood of those companies in the knowledge graph to see like what are the relationships between these companies, and to kind of gain some insight perhaps about how they are similar or how they are different. So you can see a local knowledge graph of SaaS companies, right? And you can see there's kind of a cluster of them in San Francisco and New York, and maybe in the DC area. You can see Mark Benioff here is one of the founders of Salesforce. And because it's structured data, you could also view it on a map.
Oh, wow.
You can see kind of the distribution across the world of SaaS companies.
That's super quick, by the way. This is awesome.
Yeah, well, even with this lag I'm getting from running the stream at the same time.
It's not noticeable, so I don't see any lag.
Yeah. So this, you can query the knowledge graph using sort of these drop downs, because there's basically an ontology of these different property types. So I could say, let's see, search for products that are, let's say, brand Nike, that are, let's say, title shoes. And you can see here, this forms what's called a Diffbot query language statement. So this is kind of like an SQL, a way of structured querying. And so here are all like the 73,000 Nike SKUs, and you could browse and get details about each of these products, the shipping weight, the SKU, and so forth, and sort of monitor this.
And you can get this as structured data,
so
like
that's
in a CSV file.
Yeah, you can export as CSV. So let's say, sorry, I have a little bit of lag here. Let's go back to.
Oh, no worries. We're live, right? This is.
Yeah, this is what happens.
This is what happens.
So here's like so if I click on CSV, we also support JSON output for the developers. So here's like a list of all the SaaS companies in the world, and I can choose what I want to include as columns in my CSV here. So let's say I want the quarterly revenue, or I want the stock symbol or the stock exchange, the SIC code. And then I can give it a name, like these are SaaS companies, and that generates a CSV. So I won't. I guess demo.
Yeah, don't try to download it. That's a lot of data.
Yeah. This is 114,000.
I noticed that. That's why I said don't hit the button. Because
yeah. Okay, I'll leave that. So that's one way you can get information out of the knowledge graph into like Excel or into your CRM or other kinds of tools. I'll also demo how you can go the other way and go sort of the other direction. So here's an integration that we built with a spreadsheet. I call this example dirty data, and you can see why if you look at this toy example. So this is the kind of data that you might have inside your CRM, right? Although in your real CRM, you wouldn't have 10 of these, you'd have maybe 10,000 of these, right? You can see in the location field, there's missing data. There's different levels of granularity. Like here, someone just typed in the country. Someone just typed in maybe a full street address. Here, someone typed in like second floor, attention Bob Goodman. And here, someone put a web address, right? So this is like a semantic error. And in the company name field, you see typos. So Mocha Technologies Inc., INK. You see like non-English in here and so forth. So what you can do is you can basically enhance this data using the Diffbot knowledge graph. So I have a function here, enhance this organization. And let's say these are the columns I care about. And I pass in the data I have, which is in this case, this is the name and location.
Okay.
And it's basically calling out to the Diffbot knowledge graph. And I can do this for all of these fields. And
this is crazy powerful.
So it's sorry, I'm getting a lot of lag in this stream. So
it's fine. I mean, it populated the names. I see the industry, the employees.
Let me explain what it's doing. Yeah, let me explain what it's doing. It's basically taking noisy, perhaps manually entered data, and it's using machine learning to match it against the entity in the Diffbot knowledge graph, right? And then it's returning, in this case, the entity identifier and the name, location, industries. Let me try to run this again. I think it's probably just a lag.
Yeah, and this is all in a simple Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. Let's see.
So what it's doing is taking the
lag.
information it has and pulling it from, I guess, the massive human intelligence knowledge graph and putting it all in a structured format.
Yeah. Let's see if I can. Oops. I wonder what's causing this lag. Okay. Well,
no worries.
So one of the rows came back.
If you want, we have so many questions from the audience.
Cool.
If you want to do that, and then we can jump back into this.
Sure. Yeah. We can come back to this later. But
okay.
what you should have saw is basically how we can basically enrich the information, right, and give you like information like about the industry and the size of the company, and help you find duplicates and stuff.
This used to be one of my first jobs, Mike, when I was starting out and I had to do business development for an organization. I was given a company name and I had to fill out a very massive spreadsheet with a lot of columns. And it was so tedious to first try to find the data, make sure it's accurate data, type it in manually, right? And clearly I made mistakes typing it manually or copy pasting and all of that. This would save people so much time. And there was a question here where it also reminded me of something called Zoom Info. So Matt is asking a question if you've dealt with Zoom Info because it looks similar to what they do for their sales leads, like trying to find the contact information and all that.
That's one of the use cases for Diffbot is sales and marketing. So helping you identify both better understanding your own customer base, right? So understanding the customers you have in your CRM, or helping you find similar customers to the ones you have to get you more business, right? So how Diffbot's approach differs from companies like Zoom Info is I would say Zoom Info is kind of, it uses very traditional approaches to getting the information. So it's a lot of like contact sharing and they have like a manual research team. Diffbot takes like an AI approach, right? So there's another company called like Dun & Bradstreet. It's kind of like a pre-internet company. And so they have like a warehouse of people somewhere in Texas that are just like cold calling people, sending them, I get a postcard from them every year where I have to update like the street address of Diffbot and mail it back. Right. Of course, that kind of database is not going to be accurate or up to date anymore. The company might not even be there anymore. So, we've had a lot of customers that have compared Diffbot's approach versus things like Zoom Info and Dipbot and Dun & Bradstreet, and it's almost like 10x better in terms of recall, accuracy of information, and trustworthiness of the information versus those kind of tools.
Wow, I mean, this is completely life-changing, business-changing for so many. I can imagine, especially for sales and marketing folks that spend hours and days trying to get this data where you can click a button and enrich the data you already have. I think that's really powerful. Question here from Jim. He's asking, can you create knowledge graphs focused on certain patent document domain topics?
Yeah. So patent documents, as you know, they're public domain. So Diffbots were able to analyze those PDFs. Actually, I used to work as a patent attorney, so this is like an area I'm really IP law and stuff. I'm really passionate about. But yeah, we can analyze patents, the detailed description and background portion of patents, as well as the claims, and pull out the terms inside those patents and build like knowledge graphs that allow you to easily search those patents and uncover innovation.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's also a good source of market intelligence to give you a preview of what kind of a company might be developing in their patent filings. So a lot of people follow like Apple's patents, for example, and speculate on whether they'll release what the next product will be from Apple.
And I'm sure it'll save time as well if you've got all that data structured where you can easily consume. Very interesting. Yeah. So Scott here is asking, how do you set up the initial ontology? How do you find and structure company hierarchies?
Yeah, so Diffbot's mission is to try to build a complete map of human knowledge. And what we do is we just determine at the top level, like what are the important kinds of entities, what we call the top level types of the ontology. People care about other people, they care about organizations, they care about products, they care about articles. These are all what's called the top level of the ontology. Down in the lower levels of the ontology, like underneath products, you have Pokemon Go trading cards or NFTs, right? We don't get into defining the ontologies at the lower levels. We use AI and machine learning to try to learn those categories. And so when a new kind of concept comes up, our algorithms learn that that's a new concept and then starts building out those finer grained levels. So it's a mix of human engineering and AI. Very
interesting. And the questions are just flowing in. So I'll just try to take as many as we can here. So Jim is asking, can customers access their focused knowledge graphs results via an API? Yeah, absolutely. So you can use the Dipbot knowledge graph tools either just visually, like I was just showing you, just querying it and just like exporting to CSV as like kind of like a business person might use it. You could also use it as a developer, and any of those views, there's an API button that gives you back the raw data and the raw data provenance citation information. And so you can directly integrate with that API inside your own application, whether your own CRM or just some product you're building. So I should mention there's a lot of consumer products that are also built on Dipbot, including like Snapchat and Instapaper, and like even a wedding planning app called Zola. So in all those instances, they actually integrate with their API. They're not obviously forcing their customers to use our UI to use Dipbot. Yeah. I'd assume they wouldn't do that. So I know you had some advice that you wanted to provide for maybe if there are any students or people that are trying to break into the data science space or machine learning space. So maybe we get to that. I do want to make sure we have time to cover some of the advice that you have for those listeners.
Yeah, I would just say, data science is like a really hot field these days, and so for the person who's like looking for their first job as a working data scientist or someone going into machine learning, I would say really focus on projects. And there's there's so much open source software these days and platforms like Kaggle where you can download data sets to play with. So I would just say get hands-on, because it's really, data science is really a skill like playing the guitar or the violin, not really just about book learning and courses. So pick a project, I would say, that you're passionate about, like I did, and get really deep into it. And that'll help you stand out from all the other applicants for any position.
Yeah, I think you definitely went very deep into your knowledge graph project.
Yeah, this is all a build up to applying for a job. Yeah, right.
Oh yeah. One day you'll apply to Yahoo, right? So
yeah,
that'd be funny. Okay, so I wanted to get to other solutions that Dipbot offers, and I don't know if you want me to put your screen up again. So I know you walked through the data enrichment, and you walked through the knowledge graphs. Is there anything else you wanted to highlight in terms of how you serve customers?
Yeah, well, no. So our main products, as you can see, are the extraction APIs, Crawlbot, the knowledge graph, and natural language. So I showed you how natural language works. That's obviously accessible via an API, so you can use it in your own projects and inside your own applications, querying the knowledge graph, and then these integrations like through Excel and Google Sheets and Tableau, and yeah, we're always working on new applications as well and new integrations. So I think that was a good just kind of an overview of our products.
Yeah, and that really cool knowledge graph that you showed earlier on in the demo, I just want to let people know that you can actually go and create your own knowledge graph. I've done this for my own profile. If you just paste your bio into the free text area, it's actually going to immediately create this knowledge graph for you. So it was a lot of fun for me to experiment. I had a couple of other people in the data community use that tool for just creating knowledge graphs with their documents or an article. So it was very cool to see how quick and how responsive that was. So encourage folks to go ahead and check that out at divbot.com. I think you have to click on something once you get there, but it was fairly simple for me to figure it out.
Yeah, just go to products, natural language, and
there you go.
There's no, you don't have to register or give us any info to test it. There's just like a box there that you can just try putting in text, and you can feel free to put, if you speak another language, try your native language in there, and you can generate a knowledge graph from that as well. Yeah,
really, really interesting. So I have a question in terms of what you expect to see from Diffbot in the next 5 to 10 years. And I know it's a very difficult question because we don't have a crystal ball, but kind of what is your mission? What is your vision? Do you see every human using the Diffbot kind of search engine to get information? Or where do you see this is going?
Yeah, so we, I mean, our mission is to try to build, a complete map of human knowledge, and like we want to basically create, like a factual search engine, one that's based on understanding the objective reality of the world and having an accurate picture of all the entities in the world. So, and we want to basically build an engine that is accessible to everyone. So today's Diffbot, you have to still be pretty technical. You have to query it, using these drop downs in a query language, or you have to be like a business professional, like maybe using a spreadsheet to enrich data. But we have experimental versions of Diffbot where you just talk to it in natural language. You ask it a question, and we have certain customers that use Diffbot in that way too, and it can just return back your answer with a natural response. And I think that's really how you reach folks like my mom and dad or my grandmother who would never learn the Diffbot query language in order, but they could benefit so much from factual information, and where we want to build what we call a universal factoid question answering system. So that's a lot of words, but what that means is a system where you can ask it, an objective question. It can tell you the answer directly, and it can tell you why that's the answer and point you to the primary sources of that information on the web so that you can learn more. And I don't think something like that is something we have today with our current environment of search engines, where it's mainly an ad-sponsored ecosystem. And I think we'd like to build that.
That's an amazing vision, and I'm sure it'll take a lot of dedication and hard work. Not to derail us, but question, you mentioned objective. Will there be a future where Diffbot can provide answers to what's the best restaurant to go to in, Salt Lake City or something like that?
Yeah. Well, we don't do that today just because we are sort of a knowledge platform, right? And different applications that use Diffbot may have their own subjectivity or opinions about what's the best thing, right? Like that question you'll get, if you ask a human being that question, different people will have different favorite restaurants, right, in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And so there's no right or wrong answer to that question, right? That's what we call relevance, right, in the search world, a personalized ranking function, right? So right now we're focused on objective facts, but we're not trying to build like an AI that has like its own opinions or its own personality or emotions, or like a chatbot kind of AI that's kind of like people talk about, like this, sort of big AI, grand AI that, it's like a replica of a human. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to build something that can answer factual questions and give you like the truth so that you can make up your own mind about your own thing. But applications that use Diffbot certainly could involve those applications might personalize, right? If those are applications that are for the user.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And a question I always love to wrap up with is, because we do still have several questions we just didn't have time to get to, is where can people go to continue the conversation with you or learn more? I know divbot.com is one of those options, but do you have a preference of where people can reach out?
Well, I mean, one thing I want to plug is the Knowledge Graph conference that's currently ongoing. So tomorrow I'm speaking at it about knowledge graphs and market intelligence. So I encourage you to check out the conference if you want to learn more about knowledge graphs. There's like quite an amazing group of industry and academic folks interested in that topic. And yeah, I mean, if you want to learn more about our tools, we have like a free 2-week trial that anyone can test. You can sign up and use. If you're a student learner or if you're academic, so we partner with about a dozen or so academic institutions where we give them just free access to our knowledge graph. So if you're a researcher, if you're a data journalist, and we give you free access to our knowledge graph so you can use it. And a lot of papers and stuff have been written using the Diffbot knowledge graph as a research tool. So yeah, I'd invite you to check out our blog if you want to read a survey of those papers, and check out our free trial if you want to test it, or just reach out to me.
There you go. On LinkedIn, does that work, or do you live somewhere else?
Just hit me up on LinkedIn, or
there
send
you
me an
go.
email. It's mike@divbot.com.
Oh, very easy. Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time and educating at least me on market intelligence and knowledge graphs. You've definitely opened up my eyes to things that I didn't really think about that much, in terms of like, oh, when I Google something, the first 5 things that come up are, just happen to be sponsored content that take me somewhere to go ahead and buy something or spend my money, or at least get my attention. I definitely think there is a need for Diffbot, and I'm looking forward to seeing where you take this.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really fun having this conversation with you.
Awesome. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day, and thank you those for joining us live or listening to the recording. You can find us on LinkedIn. Bye.
Bye.